with a different style sheet and, well, some new styles in the same style sheet. And a couple of tweaks to the JavaScript. Nothing functionality-wise, just changing the markup a little. So let's have a look at a couple of those. In the CSS now, I've imported a Google font, which we'll talk about tomorrow probably. But imported a web font and used it. So I'm using Open Sans on some of these things. And then using a different font here and italicizing it. I got text transform uppercase. Does anybody happen to use this on their homework? There just happened to be some examples of that in the morning. Random CSS stuff that people decided to use. Does what it sounds like. Even if you wrote it lowercase, it'll uppercase everything. And then we don't transform this. So what is this selector saying? H1 space span. In English, what does that mean? So what I mean by that is like this one. If I were to translate that selector in English, I would say a div that is a direct child of a section. So what is this saying? What kind of elements is this going to match? Well, first of all, is it going to match H1s or is it going to match spans? Spans, right? So which spans? The ones inside an H1, including those with, some layers in between. If it's anywhere inside of it, even with something in between, it'll match. So a descendant of an H1. So let's put some spans in my H1 here. I'm going to put it around A and of. And the span is just a generic inline element, no semantic meaning. The inline equivalent of div. Refresh. Ooh, now they're little and italics. This is really insignificant, but I meant to do it in my previous commit. All right. Got some other stuff going on here. I'm using Flexbox, which is a new CSS feature that's been around for a little while now. Pretty well supported. Most browsers have at least a glitch or two in the way they implement it, but support is decent. Got details. Ooh, DL. What's this business? So I changed the JavaScript to use a DL instead of a UL. Who knows what a DL is? A UL is an unordered list. An OL is an ordered list, like a numbered list. DL is a description list. In HTML4 and earlier, it was called a definition list. The idea is it's a list of terms and descriptions. Looking out here at MDN, element encloses a list of groups of terms and descriptions. Common uses for this element are to implement a glossary or display metadata, a list of key value pairs. Key value pairs is exactly what we're showing here, right? We had the name of the field, the label, and then its value. We were just putting those both inside text content of an LI. But if we separate them into a term and a description, then we can style them differently, a little easier. And it's a little easier to add them to the DOM. It might take a few more lines, but we don't have to worry about the fact that, like on the color one, we've got a div and some plain text that we need to add. So the markup for that just looks like this. You have a DL, and then you have DT and DD, term definition. And you could wrap those in an LI if you wanted to. I did, but you don't have to. That's optional. So I just changed render list to use DL instead of UL, and then I changed render list item. I still have an LI, but then I create a DT and a DD, which I append to the LI. And then on the DT, that's the term, I just set the text content to the label. And then on the DD, I set the inner HTML to the value. because that's the one that could have the div in it. Breaking it up this way also makes it easier if we wanted to get completely rid of inner HTML and use the DOM methods to insert the color div. It'd be a little easier now because we could just append it to this DD element, which is a little easier than if we had both a text node and another div inside of the same thing. Then we just append them. So pretty minor change, but then my style sheet targets those. So if we have a look at how it works, Jackie, what's your favorite color? Blue. Age 2, 3, 4, 5. All right, cool. Notice now these are all aligned on the right. All the labels line up on their right side, and then these all line up on their left. So I just styled them a little differently. Kyle, whose favorite color is whatever that is. Seafoam green or something. 23. Ooh, got alternating background colors going on. Just like somebody's homework. Whose name haven't I said at all? Heidi. Heidi. His favorite color is, what is that, mauve? Go. Yeah, see, we got stripiness going on there with the background color. A little easier to pick out where one ends and the other begins. Want to look at the style sheet for that real quick. That's the very last rule in here. It's a DL. Remember, that's definition list or description list these days. So each new person's information is a whole separate list, right? They're all DLs. And then I use this, which is a pseudo class, noted by a colon. The most common one you'll see is hover. So this would be, an anchor that you have hovered over. So essentially, when your mouse hovers over that thing, it automatically temporarily adds this hover pseudo class, so that rules that you've set for that will automatically match it for as long as you're hovering. Then when you move it out, that'll happen. But there are other pseudo classes too. This is a relatively new one. Doesn't work absolutely everywhere, but it's pretty well supported. Nth of type. So you could say like the third of this type or the fifth of this type, and you can even say even and odd. So we said for every even description list, the second, the fourth, the sixth, give it a background color of white smoke instead of transparent. So we've got every other one. So if we did delete one out of the middle, it would maintain the striping because the DOM would update, and now what was previously an odd one would be an even one. Yeah, Carson. There's a small difference between those two. So if you had inside a div, say you've got a paragraph followed by a list, followed by another div or whatever, nth child would count all of those. If you said nth of type, then it would only be like the third paragraph, and any other children wouldn't count toward that number. Get it? Yeah. So nth child versus nth of type. Difference being they all have to. It's only going to count elements of the exact same type. Yep. Good question. Did I actually change something here? Oh, I messed with the spacing. Groovy? Okay, let's do some other stuff to this. Yesterday I promised that we would talk a little bit about organizing your code, and we didn't get to that, or actually I knew that by the time I got to the afternoon that we wouldn't get to it. But there was a slide for it. So we're going to do that now.